Advantages of payback period is that one, it is easy to understand and calculate. So you can see payback is very straightforward. You just look at the initial cash flows, initial investment over initial cash flows. Number two, it is reliable because it uses cash flows and not profit. So it is very reliable. Disadvantages of payback is that it ignores cash flows after the payback period. The moment you get the payback period, you completely ignore the cash flows that arise after that period. It is not an absolute measure of profitability because it has good no basis. For example, a certain project can pay back earlier than the other, but you notice that these two projects are different, so the decision cannot be that accurate. It does not take into account the time value of money. It does not include discounting. That's a very big problem. Advantages of account rate of return. One, it is easy to understand because it uses a percentage. So remember, account rate of return was 4%, so people can understand to say we are earning maybe 4% on our average investment. It's easy to calculate because you just need to know the formula, average profit over average investment. Then it considers the whole life of the project. Remember, when we are calculating ARR, we looked at the profits from year 1 to year 5. Then disadvantages of account rate of return are that it does not take into account the time value of money. It does not use discounting, so it is not reliable. It is unreliable because it uses profits and not cash flows. Okay, so what we are going to do now is I want to give you a format of NPV, which, so in the exam I told you that you always have a question of 25 marks, which is very common. Sometimes if you are unlucky, it cannot appear, but studies have shown that the question is likely to appear in section C of your exam. So I'll put here the NPV layout. Alright, so the NPV layout will be this. Make sure you master the NPV layout. It will have years. You show years, maybe year 1, maybe to 5 or to 6. Then you are going to show your sales. Then you are going to deduct total cost. Total cost can be variable cost and the fixed cost. Then if you deduct sales and total cost, you get your operating cash flow. Then after operating cash flow, you deduct tax. Then after tax, you are going to add tax saved on capital allowance. Remember, depreciation is not allowed, but only the tax that you save on depreciation will be treated as cash inflows. Then scrap value, if it's available, maybe scrap value is 6 million and so on. Then initial cost, which will be included in year 0. Then you have working capital. So working capital, what happens is that when you invest in working capital, funds needed for day-to-day business operations, you invest from year 0, and in the final year of the project, working capital will be recovered. So you just add them up and find the total figure. We'll explain that when we start learning. When you start doing the calculations. Then we have net cash flow. So you start from operating cash flows, add tax, tax saved, scrap value, initial cost, working capital, then you have your net cash flows. Then you are going to have your discount factor. So this discount factor is the WACC. So you can either be given this discount factor, or you can calculate using the formula for WACC. Then you're going to have your present values, then you're going to have net present value. So always in section C you have a question like this. So this is the layout that we're going to be using when we're calculating net present values. Okay, so there's something we have to discuss about this format. So the first thing we should talk about is inflation. So we define inflation as the increase in prices. Let me write first. We define inflation as the increase in prices which affects the real value of money. So when prices are increasing, the real value of money decreases. For example, in Malawi, you remember, people used to buy 2 liters cooking oil at less than 2,000 rands. But now we are buying the same maybe at 30,000 rands or at 40,000 rands. That's inflation, because the value of money is reducing. Now there are 2 types of inflation that we'll be using in financial management. This includes specific and general. I'll send these notes soon after this class. Specific and general rates. These are the 2 types of inflation. Now, specific inflation rate is where every variable has its own inflation rate. So every variable has its own inflation rate. We mean maybe sales 3%, variable cost 2%, then fixed cost 1%, and so on and so forth. So every variable has its own inflation rate. while general we mean inflation rate is applicable to all so one inflation rate applicable to all variables. So they can say everything is increasing at 10%, so including sales, inflation, everything, sales, variable cost, fixed, all these are increasing at 10%, for example. That's general. So all variables, so that's what we mean. So all variables are subject to one inflation rate. Okay, so you have to know about inflation. Then you also need to know about tax. Right? We don't really need to define tax, but just to remind you that tax are legal imposed contributions on state revenue. So whether you like it or not, you have to contribute. Oh, there's one more thing on inflation. This is the Fisher formula. It will be given in the exam. I could even capitalize it. So Fisher said the work which you have calculated does not include inflation. So before you appraise a project which has variables which are subject to inflation, when variables we mean sales, variable cost, working capital. So if your variables are subject to inflation, it means your work should also be subject to inflation. So what Fisher said, he came up with a formula which he said 1 plus I think I need a small I. Okay. 1 plus I equals 1 plus R multiplied by 1 plus H. Okay. So where I is the money rate, money or nominal. Money or nominal rate. So money or nominal rate is the cost of capital which includes inflation. That's what it means. Then R is the real rate. Real rate we mean the cost of capital before inflation. So the work that we calculate is known as the real rate. There's a problem with some keys. Then H is the inflation rate. That's the inflation rate. So this formula will be very important when we are dealing with project appraisal. Next, let's look at taxation.